Death Stranding. What is it? Is it a video game? Or is it art? Is it its own genre? Or is it derivative? Is it saying a lot? Or is it saying a little? Everyone who's played through the game can either answer all of those questions or none of them. But these questions are frankly irrelevant to those that are interested in purchasing Death Stranding but have never played it themselves. In this review, I'll try my best to give you guys a good idea of what to expect from the game, without spoiling anything. I'll do both a spoiler-free and a spoiler section. The spoiler-free section will contain gameplay of the prologue, while the spoiler section will be gameplay from my current save game. So without further ado, let's dive into the insane world of Death Stranding. First off, let's talk about the gameplay that you'll experience in Death Stranding. Here, you play as Sam Porter Bridges, a UPS delivery man now turned porter now that every day's forecast calls for overcast. Taking packages to and fro from location to location, usually on foot, but there are vehicles here too. Essentially, it works like this. You access a terminal at a location, and there you'll find a list of available orders. Some essentially tell you, hey, just bring it to us in one piece, but others are timed with say 30 minutes to deliver it, or that the contents are fragile and cannot be submerged underwater or take a small fall. Then, once you've taken on your order, you can rearrange your current cargo and the new cargo you'll be delivering in any manner you see fit, or just have the game automatically arrange it for you. And then, you're off to the races. Well, okay, when I say races, it's more like a turtle and fox affair, where you actually participating in a race like, a race, winds up with you getting eaten by a prehistoric whale covered in tar. Have I mentioned this game's weird yet? But I digress. Once you have your order or a whole slew of new orders under your belt, you're thrown back into the game world to deliver your cargo. The landscape here is as massive as it is fierce. However, despite its immense size, you can really tell how meticulous the planning was for its world. There's rocky cliff faces, bumpy forests, and snowy as snow can get mountains to face here. You're helped, of course, by the incredible and seamless community element of this game. Surely you've heard about it by now, but in this game, any structure or little emoji sign that you build or any vehicle that you use and don't tear down has the chance of being placed in another or maybe hundreds of other players' worlds. You can place down generators for gear, bridges over rivers, and the list just goes on of helpful and interesting devices to help you and a faceless but appreciative player out there in your journeys. However, no matter how daunting a stretch of land looks, there's always a way to overcome it, with or without another player's intervention. Whether you wish to take a head-on approach or take the road less traveled in hopes of evading the aforementioned tar whales. And speaking of tar whales, let's talk about enemies for a bit. You'll encounter both these main enemy types within the first couple hours of gameplay, so don't worry about spoilers. First off, you've got your human adversaries, called mules. The big ol' meanies that want nothing more than to steal and hoard your cargo for themselves. And if they get it, you have no choice but to go back and get your cargo. But fear not, you have the strand on your side. Essentially, this is a piece of rope that, when timed correctly, lets you counter a mule attacking you. This is where you'll find the first real issue with the game. This is a game from late 2019, yet it mirrors melee combat from the 2007 Assassin's Creed. Mules, for being hoarding psychopaths, are actually very well mannered, and let you and the current mule you're fighting have it out long before they decide to get involved. Of course, mule combat does get crazier later on. But honestly, even though it's less sit there and wait to press one button, the combat only gets easier. Not to mention it becomes easier to avoid combat altogether with your newfound skills both as a player as well as some new gadgets. So what about these tar whales, known as BTs in the game? These fare much better. Essentially, BTs have their own territories just like mules do, but here you have to rely on your BB sensor to see them, which yes, we will get to. These BTs are invisible to Sam's naked eye unless he's completely stationary. BTs won't notice you unless you're making too much noise, so you'll have to avoid running and sometimes rely on crouch walking, to the point that you'll have to have Sam hold his breath once you get too close. And if a BT does detect you, well, I won't spoil it for you. I'll just leave it at this. It's fun, it's terrifying, and it's awesome. Unless you die, of course. I mean, that kinda sucks. The only real issue with the BTs is that when you're doing story missions and you can see the location doesn't have any mule territories on the way, it can sometimes feel like, oh geez, I wonder if there's a BT territory along the way. Not a big deal, but once you've been through a BT territory once or twice, you've usually already figured out the best way around it. So going into the same BT territory more than once can feel a lot less stressful as the game goes on. Other than when in these enemy territories or in truly awful terrain though, the game is wonderfully relaxing to play. Plenty of folks want a visceral and gripping experience from their games, and there's nothing wrong with that, and you'll certainly find that upon reaching the aforementioned enemy territories. Yet, the main gameplay of Death Stranding, the walking bit, is extremely serene, often accompanied by safe but very lovely music. It's the perfect game to play while you're listening to music of your own, or watching a show, or YouTube videos, or just thinking to yourself. It sounds goofy to say out loud, frankly, but that's honest to God what myself and some others do while playing certain video games. It may be different for you, but for me at least, and others I know, a game doesn't have to be engrossing 100% of the time to count as a game. But what does it feel like to play Sam exactly? Well, he's certainly no Venom Snake, who I maintain is the best feeling character to play as in video game history, but great care has been taken here to make sure Sam feels like he has real weight to him, without feeling like a sluggish or unresponsive character. Naturally, you've got your health stats and endurance stats, but really what's different here is the balancing. Not like weapon balancing, literal balancing of Sam's weight by using the trigger buttons. When going downhill, climbing, going over rocks, or hell, just walking in a straight line with too much cargo will make Sam lose his balance, and if he falls, you not only feel like a jackass, but also risk damaging cargo. It's a cool and frankly necessary mechanic to give you some sort of interaction while holding forward on the left stick for hours on end. But honestly, I found no reason not to hold down the two triggers simultaneously, so even though its inclusion is appreciated, it's a very simple and forgiving affair in most situations. Sam also gives himself, and by extension you, little pep talks and hints while running. Not drinking your Monster Energy, TM, to replenish your endurance meter will grant a rude but frankly warranted response from Sam, but he's also open to giving you small but helpful little confidence boosts, like mutter you've climbed up worse while scaling a mountain, or mutter to himself when giving another player structure or emoji a like. And what are likes? It's what makes Death Stranding into even more of a social media platform. Essentially, likes are given to Sam by both NPCs and players alike. Completing journeys, opening emails, and simply visiting locations will garner you likes from the NPCs. And of course you can give likes to player structures and vehicles as well as receive them from other players. But I digress, back to gameplay. So you've made it through the terrain and potential enemy territories and reached your destination. Each location will have a terminal just like the other locations you've been to. So essentially, you can start the process all over again, delivering the order in question here and now picking up a new delivery needed at a different location. So is that all Death Stranding is? Going from point to point delivering packages? No, not even close. There is a huge, confusing, gigantic, intriguing, colossal, emotional, and massive story to this game. Sam isn't just out there delivering packages, he's rebuilding the United States of America through what is known as a chiral network. Sam's mission is to connect every location he delivers his packages to this chiral network. Think of it like coffee shop Wi-Fi but for the entire country. The idea of this, of course, is to be connected and try to overcome the issues that the Death Stranding has created, i.e. BTs and mules ruling the surface of Earth now, requiring the rest of humanity to live underground essentially. Along the way, you just meet fantastic character after fantastic character. Some of the symbolism is for sure caked in some Kojima-approved heavy-handedness, but I honestly couldn't find a character or performance here that I was straight up displeased with. Did I like some characters more than others? Of course. But Death Stranding has done a simply sublime job of making not only the side and main characters, but even the characters you see only as holograms, as in those you deliver packages to, just full of life. I don't want to tell you my favorites in this section because of course, spoilers, but I also don't want to get in your head that you're supposed to love every character and everything they represent in this story. And man, do some people not agree. This is the big make or break of Death Stranding for people, the story. We've already established that Death Stranding is a video game. It's not a 40 to 60 hour movie, and it's not transcending gaming either. However, before you go out getting this game or adding it to your Steam wishlist, you have to be aware of how story-oriented the game is. A YouTube video by Gamer's Little Playground totes the total cutscene time to about 11 hours, and my playthrough was around 40 hours by the end of the story, so if you plow through the story like I did, you're going to see a little over a quarter of the game as cutscenes. This was absolutely fine with me because, as I mentioned, I'm in love with this game's story and the game's world. But if you are even teetering on being disinterested in this game's premise, you are going to hate this game. The idea of this was personified in a YouTuber named Worth a Buy, a reviewer I highly respect. And not to take him out of context, but his review mostly boiled down to him not being impressed with the story or the fact that the cutscenes were so long, teamed with the aforementioned less than entrancing gameplay. It is very much like Metal Gear Solid 4 in that case. If you're into the story and love some 10 to 20 minute cutscenes, you're going to have a field day. But if you're not into the story and you're tempted to skip cutscenes to get back into it, you're going to be completely disconnected and confused by absolutely everything going on around you. This is compounded further by the gameplay itself not being nearly as engrossing as MGS4's, or for that matter most AAA super story oriented video games. It's also possible that you'll simply get bored by not knowing what's going on and all the red herrings thrown at you throughout the story. And I'll admit, by about 3/4 of the way in, I started to feel like, come on, get on with it. That led up, of course, to the final 10 hours or so, which is the big payoff where everything gets revealed, everything becomes clear, and more consistent action is the name of the game. This worked well for me. But for someone who doesn't like the story as much as I do, or is nowhere near as patient, I can easily see how this could be the game where you played 10 hours, said you'd have to finish it at some other time, and then never played it again. How are you supposed to know if you'll like a story this massive though? That's the tricky thing about recommending Death Stranding to someone. You'll either like the story and therefore like the game, or you don't like the story and the game isn't even a game to you. In my honest opinion, if you're on the fence about the game, just watch the full prologue on YouTube. Yes, the whole thing. Yes, you're going to have to play it again when you get the game anyways, but it's the safest way to ensure that your money is going into something that you will enjoy. The prologue doesn't show everything the game has to offer, but gives you a good idea of the structure of the game, introduces you to a few characters, and gives you an idea of how long cutscenes will be throughout the game. It should also be mentioned that the story will simply be too outlandish for some people. The concepts here are very strange and at times can feel hard to take seriously. The biggest and most infamous example being BB. Remember the BB sensor I mentioned when talking you through the BT territories? Well, get this. BB stands for Bridge Baby, and essentially this is a little baby inside of an incubator pod that you link with Sam in order to see where BTs are around you with a little indicator. Yep, and that's just one of the many zany concepts in this game. But like most concepts in this game, BB is a fully fleshed out character teeming with personality and charm, all without uttering a single word. What I'm saying is that, like BB, every weird concept here is at the very least decently explained, and even when you can't fully wrap your head around it, it's nonetheless a fascinating idea. There are a few times when you're just really gonna have to sit back and just accept what's happening on the screen, but at the very least, the love and attention to detail put into every facet of this game pours through the screen. What I really want those who have yet to play Death Stranding to take away from my spoiler-free section is that Death Stranding is very much a video game. It's a very story-oriented, strange, metaphor-filled thing, but it is still very much a video game. And that's something I think gets left out of the conversation about this game most of the time. Most compare it to a movie or more than a game thanks to those community elements almost making this its own social media. But it is a game through and through, no doubt about it. If a more relaxed playstyle and zany sci-fi antics are your thing, this game is for you. But if your tolerance for a long-winded story is low, then I'd stay away for now. Frankly, I think the only reason the gameplay works so well is because of the weight of the story, and the characters within the story egging you forward. All of this problem solving, all this fighting, all this hardship, just to get from A to B, if that's how you see the game, you'll hate it. Like I said, if you're not fully convinced, check out some gameplay of the prologue and take what you can from it. For me though, Death Stranding was a once-in-a-lifetime type game. It far exceeded all my expectations for it, and I loved every second. Now, onto the spoiler section. Man, wasn't it awesome at the end of the game where it's revealed that... Okay, are they gone? Hopefully you finish the game and have a decent handle on the story, because from here on in, I'm going to be a whole lot less handholdy. I've covered most of what I wanted to say about the gameplay, so let me just wrap that up. I skipped over the guns in my spoiler-free review because frankly, it's not really a big part of the game. Sure, you're going to need them when you get spotted by terrorists or during one of the few boss fights, but the whole idea of the game is that you can't just repair something by killing those who stand in your way. Of course, this is symbolized in the void outs caused by deaths, and also those you kill turning into BTs. But the general idea of violence not solving anything, i.e. killing Higgs not changing anything, needing to hug Amelie and not use the revolver on her, there are clear indications to me that despite the explosive manner of some of the boss fights, killing others is something Sam is just not meant to do in Death Stranding. Yeah, sure, you get the non-lethal games later on as well. But that and the big boss fights just come so much later in the game, that if you're taking your time with the game, unlike I did, guns honestly play a small role in the general gameplay. And how about the BT boss fights themselves? I didn't want to spoil it even with a description of how it works. But man, Sam being dragged violently towards this beautiful yet disgusting creature as BB wails her head off is just a sight to behold. BTs I felt were definitely a little too easy to beat though. You could literally just walk out of the BT area if you were quick on your feet, and then just come right back into the territory once the tar had cleared and get back anything you may have dropped. The massive extinction BT that Higgs controls was also not the best boss fight. It more or less just looks very cool, but got old by the time the health bar was at half. This trend continued with the monolithic BT whale thingy at the tail end of the journey. It looked very cool, but you just end up shooting rockets at the whale over and over again. By that point in the journey, my boots were shot and I was low on blood bags, but I got past it on my first try easily. I played the game on normal, and frankly, I wish the BTs posed more of a threat. When I play the game next, that bitch is going on hard. And the mules and terrorists? Yeah, just a very boring combat. BT territories are at least fun and interactive to go through the first few times. Mule territories are just a hassle. Plus, so long as you have your screen turned on, you can always just cancel their scans about 100% of the time anyways, so just crouch walk through the most obvious path and you're good. Again, combat isn't the point of this game, but I just got a feeling of disappointment when it was clear that the devs wanted a way for us to be able to neutralize the mule pings, but they couldn't think of an intuitive solution. I thought going through the world wars and fighting Cliff there was fantastic though. At first it was the biggest what the fuck moment for me yet, but as Cliff's story came around, goddamn it was worth it. And speaking of story, let's get into it. I'll keep it going with Cliff and talk about his story first, since other than the Amelie plot, this is easily the biggest series of twists and turns throughout the game. I thought the twist where Sam turns out to be Cliff's son in the original BB unit was just awesome, and fuck me, Cliff's final two scenes with Sam in Vietnam as well as in the flashback at the game's end were just gut-wrenching. For me, the truth of Bridget's ties to Cliff wasn't completely out of left field. I had my doubts as soon as the whole Bridget is your mom and Amelie is your sister thing began to fall apart around episode 6 for me. Regardless, they were impeccably well done scenes, and of course the acting from everyone, especially Mads Mikkelsen as Clifford Unger, was just a sight to behold. This also opens up another positive. Despite the sheer insanity of what you're seeing, I really felt like the game did a good idea of explaining what was happening within the story. It doesn't always say it flat out, but the visuals were more than enough. For instance, when Cliff was on Amelie's beach when Sam was brought back to life by Amelie. Those scenes compounded with the BB visions you got throughout the game just left such a sense of tragedy surrounding Cliff's eventual fate. And speaking of Lou, let's talk about her. Yeah, I know, we never really got confirmation on who BB-28 really is. Is she Sam's daughter? Is she Amelie reincarnated? Is she just a random BB unit? We aren't really told. For me though, it's better that way. Because at the end of the day, our boy Sam is finally going to have the chance to raise the child he never had. As I mentioned in the review, Lou is just a character all her own. Her giving Deadman the finger at the start of the game stuck out to me as one of my favorite moments. Lou wasn't the only great female character though, because goddamn do I love me some Mama. Apart from Margot Qualley being absolutely flames in her role as Mama, her tragic yet fascinating story is easily my second favorite apart from Cliff's. When she revealed that her baby was actually a BT of her tragically killed child, and seeing how broken this seemingly unstoppable woman really was, it was simply mesmerizing. And cutting the cord between her and her BT baby, ooh, that hurt. I did feel like the story got muddied somewhat by the whole conjoined twin aspect of it, and the eventual merge with Lockney sort of took away from the sheer tragedy of her story, but I still loved it. On the subject of women, we of course have to give a moment for Fragile, another great addition to the game. I really enjoyed how human Fragile felt. She of course has a very professional and clean feeling demeanor, but anytime she opened up to Sam, it always felt very real and not really forced. Death Stranding of course does run into the same issue that some games in the medium of say sci-fi or anime do, when they just need to spout some exposition at times. But with Fragile, I always felt like her scenes were very grounded. I was also glad that there weren't really any overt tensions between Sam and Fragile. They were obviously into each other, but there was no shoehorned in relationship here, and I was glad for that. And the last for main female characters is Amelie, and by extension Bridget. My feelings on Amelie are not quite as enthusiastic. I still found Amelie's story supremely fascinating, but man, they really threw us for loop after loop with her. Is she real? Is she your sister? Why doesn't she age? Is she good? Is she evil? Is she controlled by Higgs? And it just went on and on for 35 hours of the game. And then when it was all explained that she gave Higgs his powers and she's an extinction entity, I mean it worked, but it all felt a little too mushy. She's apparently hell-bent on doing the extinction and using the chiral network to make it the biggest one yet. But all it takes is Sam hugging her for her to stop? So you're saying she's not a psycho for wanting to extinguish all life on Earth? She's just having whatever an extinction entity's equivalent is to a midlife crisis and brings Higgs along? And while we're talking about him, let's talk Higgs. He's a lot like Amelie for me. I'm a fan of his story, I just wish it was a little more grounded and believable. Don't get me wrong, Higgs' outfit is absolutely amazing, and Troy Baker kills it in his role. But man, those video game references sure got old quick. Other than the mix of MGS4 and Street Fighter for the final bout between Higgs and Sam, all the video game references Higgs was spouting about being the boss we've been looking for and so on just made me cringe upon playing the actual boss battles. His BT Titan was astonishing visually, but was just boring to chew through the endless life bar. Fighting Higgs in his gun-wielding and knife-wielding form were nothing special either. Essentially, it's the same combat we've been doing, only here it's a better tactic than ever to smack a bitch with a suitcase. I also wish that Higgs was more his own character. It's one thing for him to be a pawn in a greater plan, but honestly, just pull back the insane visuals that Higgs' scenes provides and you're left with a pretty flat villain. I would have preferred a more realistic and whole-feeling character rather than just a boss archetype that Kojima was clearly going for. I would prefer something like Pain from Naruto Shippuden. Oh shit, didn't Troy play him too? But I digress. It sometimes bordered on pretentious and insulting for me when Higgs broke the fourth wall. Like, as a matter of fact, Mr. Kojima, I was very much enjoying the bring people together game, as Norman Reedus once put it. Higgs' name, an obvious reference to the Higgs boson particle, was a bit tarnished as well, as he was essentially just a red herring for Amelie the whole time. While we're on the subject, let's talk names. Mama, cause she's a mom. Dead Man, cause he's made of dead people. Die Hardman, cause it's hard for him to die. Amelie Bridges, cause she's made of Millie Bridges. Okay, I made that one up. I'm not really a fan of the names of the characters in this game, all compounded with the most egregious of them all, Hartman, cause his heart stops. And his heart looks like a Valentine heart, and the lake next to his house is a heart. Get it? I like Hartman's story and all, but man, by the time they showed the lake on the screen, I just checked the fuck out of that scene. Like, please just die for 3 minutes and explain your part of the story already. And if I had one complaint about Death Stranding, is that it is such a fantastical and difficult story to understand, in a good way. Yet with the symbolism, I just found myself going, yeah, I get it. Way too much. Like the cufflinks. Oh yeah, the thing that's like modern phones is handcuffs. Oh gee, I wonder what that means. And most of the characters in the game never meeting you for real. Gee, I wonder if that's commentary on the impersonal nature of the digital age. It's not like this symbolism and others like it in the game are bad. There's at times they felt like they stuck out like a sore thumb. And one final negative note, it sort of messed with the groove of the game when almost immediately the whole idea of Amelie and Bridges was thrown into questions within their first episode. I immediately knew that Die Hardman and Amelie were in no way being forthright with you, and that one of them was going to flip and turn out to be the big bad of the game. The game certainly threw me into the corner of Die Hardman instead of Amelie, being the big twist that would throw me, but nonetheless, a good chunk of the story was overshadowed by just knowing that as soon as hints started getting dropped, I'd know before I was meant to who wasn't being truthful in the story. And just one last negative thing. Princess Beach, really? That was the first truly long stretch of bitching I've done about the game yet in this review, but that's it for aspects I have problems with. Keep in mind I didn't hate any of the things I've mentioned, they just stuck out as negatives to me about the game. I still enjoyed all the performances here, and while not every line itself was great, it was acted out supremely well. So to summarize, I thought the core gameplay was decent. It lacks depth for sure, but it's a solid experience to play through. The combat is very meh, but it's not offensively bad like some make it out to be. And the story is the glue that just holds the whole game together. A truly wonderful story that I think anyone who can take the craziness will love. Well, what did you think about Death Stranding? Do you like it less than me? More than me? And why? Let me know. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.